Welcome to Female Fractionals, the biweekly podcast for successful female fractional executives and those ready to take the leap. In each episode, I'll bring you actionable lessons and inspiration through interviews with thriving fractional leaders and experts. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Female Fractionals. I'm your host and fractional CMO, Amanda Nizzere. On today's episode, we have Michael Lopez. Michael is an author, speaker, and consultant helping leaders, teams, and individuals to realize their potential through transformation. As a student of the human industry, Michael uses his experience in and passion for the science and practice of behavior change to design innovative change strategies. He brings a diverse leadership style forged from a blend of business, civil service, military, and athletic experience, which he uses to accelerate performance for leaders and teams of all types. Michael is also the author of a new book titled Change: 6 Science-Backed Strategies to Transform Your Brain, Body, and Behavior. The discussion with Michael was amazing and talked about various ways that fractionals that are either practicing or those who are thinking about taking the leap can take a different perspective around the idea of change. We talked about how vision boards are actually your enemy, how you should lean into stress, not listen to your brain, and how you should think about your job in a bit of a different way and fall in love with the idea of building as ways to think about change in a different way. Without further ado, let's dive into the discussion with my friend, Michael Lopez. Hi, Michael. Welcome to Female Fractionals. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks for having me. And it's great to be with you in this new world that we're both in.
Thank you. I'm super excited for our conversation. You have so many exciting things happening. But where I would love to start with you, because I find your background so fascinating, I would love for you to talk a little bit about your background, your career, and what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm happy to tell the story and just say it's an honor to be on a podcast, hosted by you and for women. And I always say this: I was raised by strong women and married to one, and have worked with many amazing women. So thank you for giving me the chance to be on here. It really is a special thing. My background, I guess, is really happened in phases, I guess. We all start with a plan in life, and then life happens and we discover things about ourselves that we maybe learned and didn't or didn't know. I started my career in government. I spent 5 years in the intelligence community. I have a bachelor's in political science. I kind of grew up and always wanted to be a spy. I thought that would be really cool. I was not a spy, just for the record, but I did work in that world. And, I'll tell you that many of the amazing things I've learned as a leader, as a teammate about organizations really started in working with the military. I was on the military intelligence side, and amazing leaders, generals, people that, reach to the highest levels of their organization and yet have to work across 100,000 person team in some ways. And so just a lot of wisdom that started there. I played college football, so I come from this world of really strong teams and leaders, and learning how to be a good follower, which is the first step in learning how to be a good leader. I was in the government space in the kind of late 90s. It was not the best time for the HR experience in the government world. I ran into this consulting company called Booz Allen Hamilton. Great organization. And I'll say that, really started my journey of understanding what strong culture can do for a company. And I think they were and are still really good at it. We did all the project work. We sold some things, we bought some things, we created some new best practices. And then they said you could go into general management. And I was like, that sounds like the worst idea I could ever imagine. I don't want to go do that. I'm not the person who's going to go get an extra 1% margin out of a business. It's just not what I enjoy. So I had some colleagues that I knew went to Ernst & Young, and I followed them there and started my, I think, journey into where I am now, which is really kind of in the space of organizational change and transformation. About a year and a half ago, I decided it was time to start my own thing. And, I've been always trying to create inside of big companies, change within those companies. Why are we doing it this way? Why does it have to be that way? Why can't we do something different? Breaking down barriers, establish systems and processes, and really being that sort of irritating little kid that never stops asking why. Um, but I realized that in order to build the thing I wanted to build, I had to do it in a way that was really authentic to me and my style and my background. And so here I am, and it's been a great almost 2 years in this new journey.
I think that, it's a really great segue into your book, which I think so many of our audience can relate to because so much of the fractional or entrepreneurial world in general is about change, whether it is the change that you're talking about in terms of making the change into a new career, or it's the change that we experience every day, whether it's code switching to having to run an actual business yourself and do all of the things that you're not experiencing when that is, taken care of for you when you have the security and the safety of the big business. So I think that leads to, just could you provide an intro to your book, which is titled Change: Six Science-Backed Strategies to Transform Your Brain, Body, and Behavior, and just talk a little bit about why you decided to focus on that and what is resonating with people?
Yeah. A couple years ago, I really started um, doing a lot more on LinkedIn and posting content to start a different conversation. Having come from the world of organizational change management, I will say that I think that industry, that discipline, that area is in need of its own transformation. And look, it's full of people doing good work, hard work, well-intentioned work that care about culture and people and teams. But I was always struggling with the idea that here we have this recipe of kind of change management standards and frameworks, and yet 70% of all transformations fail. And I just couldn't figure out, like, why are we doing the same things? And I've been the deliverer of those services. I've been the recipient of them, right? And so, I would, with my background in athletics and with the military and everything, I just was like, we know so much about the body and how to adapt our bodies and those sorts of things. And yet we show up to work and we pretend that those systems don't apply, right? We send someone to a 30-minute training and we pretend that they're different. And so I started posting about this on LinkedIn, and it was really a mission of mine to start a different conversation. There were times in my career I felt we were being disingenuous at best, and sometimes outright just being dishonest, of saying this is easy, right? Oh, I want to make the sale, so this project is not going to be hard. It's hard. They're all hard, right? Because they involve people. And so that journey on LinkedIn really started me down a path of kind of building a framework and leaning into some of these concepts, refining my own point of view. I learned a lot just doing that on LinkedIn. And so when I started my company, I was going to start writing it right out of the gate. And I had some folks tell me, well, you got to, maybe wait on that. You've got to earn some money first. You got to get clients in the pipeline. I had a few clients already. And I realized that so much of my differentiation as an entrepreneur is about my point of view. And so it was really a necessity. I had to write this story and talk about these concepts because I thought we were doing it kind of all wrong. So the book is about the foundational science of what happens to us when we try to change, and a deep dive into the sort of systems that we can leverage in order to help us change. And then it kind of walks through a process that we can use to kind of induce that in our lives. I started writing it about organizations, and I realized about a third of the way through that I needed to take a step back and talk about individuals and people and give folks the kind of toolkit to start their own change journey.
Congratulations. I know firsthand, having helped multiple people publish books, how much of a labor of love that is. So congratulations.
Yeah.
In thinking about who's listening to this podcast, there's many people. I think the fractional movement is well underway, but there's also many people that are on the cusp of making or potentially thinking about taking that leap. It is a huge change. It is a huge source of stress. Is there guidance that you could provide to people in thinking about, and when thinking about those people that are like maybe thinking about taking that leap from a scientific perspective? Because I love that the book is
Sure.
grounded in science. That's one of the things that I love the most about it. Could you provide some just perspective around like what are some of the first things that they could think about, or
Yeah.
a bit of a framework to try to making that leap a little bit less stressful?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that we can actually make it stressful. What you can do is you can change your relationship with the stress itself, right? So that's one of the big principles and strategies that I talk about is this, one of the things that holds us back from our change goals is our relationship with discomfort and with stress and not understanding what the stress response is designed to do, right? Stress is designed to get you to move. That is its physiological evolutionary purpose. It is generic. It doesn't know why you're scared or nervous. It just knows that a cascade of systems trigger in your body, and they are designed to get you to do something. Now, so that's the first thing is we need to really I'm going to use a phrase that gets used a lot, kind of lean into that experience and understand that there are levels to this stress conversation, right? And we're not talking about sustained long-term traumatic stress that is debilitating and people need to get help if they're in those situations, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about short-term acute stress that's designed to create movement in the direction of our goals. And so the book is really about understanding this idea that, when you're stressed, it's a signal, right? Go towards it, move to it, right? The only way is through. I say this to my clients all the time, right? The growth is in the struggle. And so you will not make this transition successfully if you do not first understand and start to rebuild your relationship with stress. And I call it a relationship because it is something that can be cultivated. It's something that can be directed. It's something that can also be beneficial, right? In the way that a relationship is symbiotic, right? Stress is really, really helpful. And so that's, I think, the first thing. The second thing I would say is your brain, the same, I'm gonna use my story, right? I had this narrative in my brain that for years I had to be, I come from very humble beginnings. So having a W-2 job in a big consulting firm, I had made it, right? I was good. I was good until I wasn't. And I think the same brain that gets you into this situation is not the same brain that gets you out, because the science of how our brains work is our brains are prediction machines. We are constantly guessing and anticipating what's going to happen next. The problem with that is we're only guessing based on our own referential experience, right? And so when somebody says to you, well, Amanda, that's not possible. Well, maybe in their brain it's not, because they've never seen it happen. But for those people who go on to do great things, they have a different brain telling them a different story. Or, which is the important point that I would say for people making this shift, is don't listen to it. Don't listen to all of the things that your brain is guessing is going to happen next, right? Because you're wrong by definition, right? You don't understand every outcome. So that's the third thing I would say. There's more to it, but the last thing, maybe just because I like threes, everything is in threes, is when we guess the outcome, most people set a goal and then they work backwards from that goal to figure out all the steps they need to take in order to go accomplish that goal. And then most people track whether or not they've accomplished those steps, and they have some kind of, KPI or metric that says, how close am I to the goal? One of the big things I encourage people to do, and this is probably the best advice I got from my coach when I made this move. You have a job, it's just different, right? And so you have to fall in love with the process of building something new. And I think what happens to us is because we think, oh, I don't have this environment around me, I don't have this team around me, I don't have these people, we stare at all the stuff that's sort of the white space of this experience. But if you can fall in love with the effort of building. And we actually know that, part of the foundational science, particularly of motivation, is that when we're striving, when we're pursuing things, we are far more motivated than we're like, say, avoiding something or not moving. And so you've got to kind of rebuild your mindset of like, not what did I accomplish today, but did I take steps in the direction of my goal, irrespective of whether or not it was 100 steps or two, right? And so those are things that I've really learned like along my journey. There's stuff that happened to me that I couldn't have anticipated that happened. So don't worry about that piece of it, right? Worry about taking action in the direction of your goals.
I really love that. I framed the questions in terms of those who were thinking about taking the leap, but I feel like that answer is also so relevant for those that are dealing with all of the different types of change that I know I've experienced in my first year around things like code switching, right?
Yeah.
Like it is such a different way of operating than what I was doing 1 year ago today. And so I feel like all of those different tips and tricks. So like I wrote down like lean into stress, don't listen to your brain, which I love so much because I feel like there's so many different topics that could,
Yeah.
be an offshoot to that. And then you have a job, it's just different and you have to fall in love with building is
Yeah.
so resonates with me with the types of things that we're doing. And
Yeah.
I think making sure that you're changing your perspective when you are doing such a variation on a theme of a job is so critical. So I think
Yeah.
those are just
Well, those things are also things that apply to your life, right? So you could talk about everything from making more money to having a better relationship, losing weight, right? We all set these big, huge goals and they become so overwhelming and so daunting that they actually demotivate us. One of the things I'll give a spoiler in the book is, and I apologize for this for everyone, is if you've ever made a vision board, vision boards are actually counterproductive. They actually demotivate you. And there's an interesting story in the book about why that is, because it's really about if I'm so focused on the future and this future self that I'm imagining, I can get a little bit of kind of the sort of dopamine and a little bit of the sort of serotonin hit of like, wow, I'm going to be so happy when I'm XYZ. But if you change that, one of the ways to change that is I'm happy when I'm delivering XYZ effort. I'm happy when I'm running. I'm happy when I'm studying. I'm happy when I'm listening to a podcast, when I'm writing, whatever it is. It's the act of doing something that is actually where the motivation occurs, not the outcome. And that's a big part of what we get wrong in pursuing our goals in life.
I love that for many reasons. I love the focus on action versus outcome, but it makes me feel a lot better because I've never done a vision board. I've just never been able to do it. And I feel like I've
It
gotten
doesn't.
so much flack over the years for never having the screensaver vision board come
Yeah, I
January
was at a
3rd.
conference once, and I was talking about it, and they kept teasing me that I ruined vision boards for everybody, and I was like, hey, I didn't do the study. I just quoting that it happened. So
You're just spreading the word. It's
I'm
okay.
just I'm just telling you what I read. So
So, given that you've literally written the book on change, when you're having to push through a hard moment of change,
yeah.
what do you find helps you?
Yeah, it's I really do live by these principles. I was talking to someone yesterday, and it's my poor family, right? They just it's pretty excessive, right? So the way we do some things is the way we do everything. The first thing I do is I try to self-induce as much stress as possible. Um, and again, positive stress, right? I'm not trying to create chaos in my life, but when I choose those sources of stress, it actually builds a part of your brain. Is another piece of the science. There's a part of your brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. It's part of your frontal lobe. And literally, when you do hard things or when you do things that you don't want to do, this region of your brain increases in size. It doesn't mean your physical brain gets bigger. It means that more territory is dedicated to this region. Athletes have the largest. People who live a long time have larger AMCCs. And so I try as much as I can to find hard things in small pockets that I tell myself, I don't want to do this. And then I do it. And it could be anything. It could be doing the dishes. It could be mowing the lawn. It could be a cold shower. I do that every day. It's pretty miserable. It never gets better, but I do it. And because I know on the other side of that experience, I will feel better about myself having done something difficult, whatever that capacity is. So I try to self-induce as much stress as I can. I try not to listen to my brain, particularly in moments where I'm feeling anxious. In this world, particularly with projects, right? You don't get paid every 2 weeks. It comes in big chunks. And so, I remind myself that around the corner is the next opportunity, the next thing. So that is a big piece. I take my own advice there. The second thing I do is when I am feeling anxious or nervous or uncertain, I move, I act, I do something. What can I work on right now that is going to move me forward in some way? And, you've got social media stuff, you've got client follow-up stuff, you've got posting on LinkedIn, you've got outreach, you've got, solutions you can design. One of the great lessons from the Navy SEALs, which if you've ever done any work in understanding what they do, is they say when you're lost, the worst thing you can do is stay put. Right. You'll get no new information by staying put. You have to move. And so I take my same advice and I move. The last thing I'll say, and I've just been really blessed. One of the things I talk about in the book is the power of our environment, our ecosystems around us. And that's your physical environment, your virtual environment, your social environment. I have amazing people around me that support me. And when I need help, I ask. And I don't. This can be a lonely world if you're in it, and just kind of beating the bushes doing your thing. And so, social interaction is one of the singularly most rewarding biological things we can do. And so I reach out as much as I can and try to build that ecosystem around me so I'm not feeling isolated.
Those are all really great pieces of guidance, I think, especially for, I guess it doesn't matter if you're a new entrepreneur. I think it goes through, year 1 through year 5, but I think
Yeah.
it's especially resonant for
Yeah.
newbies. So,
And you know what I would say, and I guess maybe I should add this is you are going to make mistakes. And in whatever version you define to be a mistake, right? This goes into the idea of embracing stress, but mistakes from a neuroplasticity perspective are like the most opening experiences we can have for the opportunity to learn new things. And so if you're worried about being perfect, it's going to be very difficult to make this transition. No one's thinking about you as much as you are. And so those mistakes in your mind might feel like they're the end of the world. It's just an opportunity to learn. And this is kind of this idea of, having a growth mindset and having what is called a stress is enhancing mindset. So there's some studies I reference in the book about these, which is this shift of thinking around this may not feel good, but it's good for me. And every time I mess up, it triggers me to think differently about what I need to do and then go do that. Right. And so every mistake I made is a chance to get better in some ways. And so you just have to kind of embrace that mentality.
yeah, that's great. You've been serving clients for a very long time, and now that you're out on your own, it's great. Is there anything that you would reflect on 2 years later that you think, wow, I knocked this out of the park? Or B, I wish I would have done this a little bit differently.
I mean, every engagement, you think about what you could have done differently. I will say that I've been very fortunate. I have a couple other folks that are sort of independent consultants that have left the big consulting world that have joined me in this kind of collective of expertise. And so a lot of the work I've done has been done in partnership with those people. And I'm not alone in that regard. And so I've been very fortunate. I couldn't do what I do without some support of people. So I think that's the first thing I would say is just I've been very, very lucky. Things I would do differently. Pricing is always a thing that we think about in the early days of what does that look like, particularly in your first or second kind of project that you might be working with someone on. Maybe you're competing with someone, maybe you're competing against yourself. I got some great advice from someone, and part of my thought process here is like I'm less expensive than the big companies because I don't have all the overhead, and I'm not trying to pass on a bunch of unnecessary costs. It works better for the client, works better for me. But you want to still be competitive with your industry, right? Because you are a member of in this case, for your audience, a fractional community. You don't want to undervalue what you do just because you don't have the overhead. So I think that experience of learning how to price, ask people, understand your value, understand that it's not a, time per hour kind of equation, right? That value is very differently derived. And, I've started to think of that way about like workshops and things like that I design. And I'll tell my clients, hey, look, it costs me X number of thousands of dollars in time, but you're just not paying for my time. You're paying for the value of my expertise. And so the price is the time plus the value. And so those are things that you just have to learn through trial and error. I think I've experimented a lot with different business development strategies for outreach. And, LinkedIn is a great place for that. There's a lot of people being bombarded these days by a great piece of advice. I'm sharing with you all the great advice that I got, which is good, which is someone told me that most people on LinkedIn are trying to tell you something so they can sell you something. And I was just like, wow, that's really good. Yeah. So thinking differently about how I approach LinkedIn as a platform and how I reach out, I've been much less worried about trying to land a sale and more focused on building a relationship. And so, and then, that goes to the power of referrals. And, I think finding a BD and outreach strategy that's authentic for you is something that I've experimented a lot with and had some starts and stops.
Yeah, it's great. And you are a LinkedIn top voice, which is amazing. So it's clearly working for you. And your voice is very authentic and speaks very much to who you are. You're out there speaking about very important topics in a very Michael way. So I think it's fantastic.
I appreciate
It's
that.
great. So the way that what I would like to do first before I go into rapid fire is how can everyone get a copy of the book?
You can go to it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Ingram, all those places. You can just search for it. You can go to my website, michaeljlopez.coach, and there's a link right there on the homepage. From there, you can, follow me on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn. I like connections. I don't like as followers as much on LinkedIn. I like to actually have connections with people, but you can do both. I'm pretty active on Instagram and just started a YouTube channel, which is where all of the episodes that I do on my, so I host a weekly LinkedIn Live series with other top voices. This is one of those things I just started without really thinking about it. So all those episodes are there, and that's been a ton of fun. So you can subscribe to that.
Great. I will make sure that I link to all of that in the show notes and on the website too. The way that I like to wrap every conversation is with rapid fire questions. And
Let's do
you
it.
kind of gave me free reign to ask you whatever.
Ask me whatever
So
you want.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to take that free reign. Okay. So I was really interested in this first one, but so these are meant to be answered in one word or one sentence or less.
I'll do my best.
Most unusual place you've taken a client call.
I've taken client calls from other client locations, which is kind of weird. So it feels a little bit like cheating in some ways, but yeah, that's probably the most unusual.
Best investment you've made in yourself.
Uh, Health, fitness, exercise. Yeah, that it all starts with that.
Fun fact about you that's not on your LinkedIn profile.
I'm partially colorblind. So, yeah. So what that means is I can't see very light colors look white, very dark colors just look black. So, fun fact is I can't see rainbows.
Oh, okay. 3 apps you can't live without.
Oh, my Peloton app um, is a big one. I would say, I mean, it sounds sad to say my social media apps, but just because I use them so much for work, but I'm gonna save that one.
Mhm.
Um, my podcasts. I love podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. And then I'm a big Blinkist fan. So I love quick summaries of books, particularly for work. So I would say my Apple Podcasts, Blinkist, and Peloton.
Okay. Favorite way to celebrate a win?
Dinner with my wife.
Hmm. Most used emoji in professional texts.
uh, Probably the thumbs up.
I was wondering if you were an emoji guy. Okay,
I
2
have
more.
this weird feeling that men over 40 shouldn't use too many emojis, but I don't, it's just a theory. Maybe, maybe not a habit, but yeah.
What's your go-to comfort food?
Oh, comfort food. I really like dark chocolate.
Okay. And finally, favorite business book that you've read recently.
How Emotions Are Made by Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett. It's a kind of not a real business book, but sort of is a business book. I reference it in my book, and it was a transformative understanding of how our brains actually work. And yeah, it's really incredible.
Okay. Your rapid fire session is over. Thank you for giving me free reign.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. This was an amazing discussion. I think our listeners are going to take away so many things. I wrote notes down and I've already had a discussion with you multiple times about your book. So hopefully our listeners had a pen and paper out. So thank you so much, Michael. It was great to see you.
Thank you, and congrats to you on this endeavor and all the good stuff you're doing. And it's been fun to be on this journey a little bit together with you, and just really excited for you. So thanks for having me.
As always, please remember to follow, like, comment, and share. And don't forget to head over to femalefractionals.com for a full transcript of the show and links to everything we talked about during our conversation. Thanks for listening.